I'm joined here today by Yvonne Kiernan, our Head of Valuations and Research, to discuss the outlook for 2022. Yvonne, I suppose if you could start with your outlook for the commercial real estate market itself for the year ahead, if you can dust off your crystal ball for a moment.
Absolutely. Susie, we're starting off on a really strong trajectory from 2021 in terms of the economy and the wider real estate market. Ireland has achieved substantial vaccination rates, a sizable recovery on unemployment rates and unemployment data, record tax revenues, and improved customer spending off the back of record levels of pandemic savings. In 2021, there was a reported 5.5 billion worth of investment spend, which is the second largest year on record. And it's likely that 2022 will see similar levels going forward as there's pent up demand for stock in the traditional sectors, particularly for prime stock as the flight to quality continues, but also for non traditional sectors such as healthcare, senior living, and data centres.
Okay, excellent. I mean, that all sounds very positive. And Yvonne, you mentioned obviously savings, so pent up savings. So I believe there's about 136 billion euros of savings now, which is a record high. So that's personal savings sitting in Irish bank accounts or deposit accounts. So earning obviously very little returns.
Yes.
I heard Dave McWilliams refer to punters having lots of spare money in their back pockets. So I suppose what does that money in back pockets or indeed money in deposit accounts actually mean for commercial real estate?
Well, there's a couple of ways that it can impact. Obviously, there's people who are going to go out now with money and looking to spend it. So retailers are going to try and attract them to the bricks and mortar stores, back into the bricks and mortar, rather than the online spending that we've seen over the pandemic period. But also it means that people are going to look at investments where they can achieve sort of better gains for their monies rather than keeping them on deposit.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really important. So that's the outlook for the market itself. Can you give us your views, Yvonne, in terms of the outlook for the fund?
Absolutely. The outlook for the fund is good. We're primarily Dublin based, but we do have a number of assets outside Dublin in Galway and Cork and a number of retail parks. And they're particularly important given the subsector of retail that they are. During the pandemic, people were trading very strongly there given the types of retailers that are located in those parks. And obviously that they're large open space and it's much easier to socially distance. Our plans for the funds are to continue with our main strategy, which is to have a bedrock of core income producing properties. And then we will use our in-house chartered surveyors to release value from properties which have value add initiatives that can be applied to them. Obviously, we're going to continue on our strong rent collection rates. Like last year, we had 97% of a rent collection rate, which is great, but obviously we aim for higher for next year, for this year. And then also we're going to continue on our sustainability.
Just to touch on sustainability for a moment, it's obviously really important, for the environment. It's really important for Aviva as a company. It's one of our main corporate goals. It's also really important for our customers because obviously, if we can achieve sustainable buildings, it means we attract better quality tenants, and those tenants are then better placed to pay higher levels of rent, and indeed are more resilient in terms of paying rent through turbulent times, such as the pandemic we've just experienced. So that's really important. So Yvonne, you've touched on lots of positive news, which is fantastic for both the market itself and indeed the fund. So I'm going to bring in a little negative angle now. What would you identify as the three main risks facing real estate going forward?
Yes, Susie, obviously the pandemic is still an issue and we're hoping that it's near the end, but there's always chances that new variants could emerge. And that's important in terms of its impact on retail trading and also on things like people returning to the office. For myself, working from home, that's an important consideration. Inflation and its impact on interest rates is a concern, but inflationary pressure is due to ease towards the end of 2022. Also, I think one of the main criteria is the lack of stock. The lack of good modern industrial stock last year was one of the main components into how the industrial sector performed so strongly. But I think obviously if you look at the number of site closures we had during the pandemic period in 2021, that's going to impact on the development of, say, new office space in Dublin, which we already know that those that are underway are 56% pre-let.
Really good points. And actually, when you tie in inflation with development, there's obviously very high inflationary impact on development costs at the moment. So again, another risk is obviously the increase in costs in developing new properties, which is a problem also. So I suppose if you were to identify the key initiatives or the key trends that we might see emerging in 2022 in commercial real estate, what would you identify?
I think adaptability, culture, and experience in technology. I mean, over the pandemic period, we've seen changes to how people live, how people shop. As I mentioned earlier on, retailers are changing their offering. They're offering more experiential retailing experiences to get people back into the bricks and mortar stores. And office demand is changing as well. People are looking for more flexible space in order to have, networking spaces, innovation spaces, spaces for collaboration. Also, resilience and covenant strength. As landlords, we can see how important it is to have resilient properties in the fund, such as the retail parks that I've mentioned earlier on, but also in terms of making sure that the tenant's covenant strength is good. And obviously our in-house chartered surveyors are on hand all the time, sort of keeping up communication with our current tenants, particularly over the last couple of years. One of the most important factors, I think, going forward will be ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. And it's going to be a key focus for investors and for occupiers during 2022. So what we're going to see is a gap between what we call a green premium for properties, modern properties with good ESG credentials, and a brown discount for older, non-performing properties. And I think it's going to be a key focus for investors, for funding, for developers, and for occupiers in the coming year.
I think, Yvonne, you hit on a key point there around adaptability. We've all become very adaptable over the last 2 years between working from home, homeschooling, isolating, social distancing. But I do think it's also very important for landlords and tenants to be adaptable now going forward. And I think that's something that Aviva can really bring to the table as a landlord. So I suppose my 3 key takeaways from what you've just said, Yvonne, are sustainability, adaptability, and resilience. So if anybody would like to learn more about the commercial real estate market or indeed the fund itself, please contact your financial broker.